The next handout was the letter that was approved by the commission yesterday in regards to the request to have elected and department heads resubmit a 2018 and 2019 budget within the established guidelines of what was requested in July for the preliminary budget, which was to reduce budgets by 17.5% below June 30, the revised June 30, 2017 budget levels, and then resubmit a budget narrative to define what the impacts of those reductions are, and submit them back to myself by October 13th, 2017. The next page defines what the 17.5% level pencils out to, which pencils to a $31,290,000 budget proposal. Currently, the revenue budget is $31,373,000. So that will give us $83,000 to play with in excess funding, revenues above expenditures. It also then includes a workshop schedule of budget workshops by department and elections office. That if you would get back to Diane with any difficulties or any changes that you would like to propose as quickly as possible, so we can shuffle things around and put that together as concretely as possible. And if there are any questions?
I have a question. If, in order to do this, obviously it's got some staff in the treasurer's office, there is no operational budget to cut, and still produce property tax statements and pay for the bank duties and the if it means negotiating with unions, who is it that I contact to talk about reduced hours?
I've already had a request by AFSCME to approach the board in regards to allowing furloughs without impacting seniority levels, and making a change in an MOU to our CBAs. So I've already had a request from one union. I would suppose that we may have, after this, additional requests from other unions or requests from the electeds to discuss with the unions doing an MOU. So please forward those to me, and we can begin a conversation and a negotiation to that effect.
Frank, I have a question. I think it might answer itself within the paragraph, but and I'm probably not the one in my office that usually asks this question. To resubmit the budget projections that we asked in the paragraph down here, include revised budget narrative that incorporates a modification and discusses the impact of the budget cuts to services no later. And I'm going to have to ask some of my staff this as we do this. With that last line being in there, that we could discuss, incorporates a modification and discusses the impact of the budget cuts to services. I think I can work that out. The issue that I've had over the years is in litigation. If we have not asked for something like in our prelim budget, like the preliminary budget is to ask for what you believe the need the office is. And there's no hiding anything. If we got this is what we need, there's no guessing that we're not going to get everything. That's just the way it goes. But if I haven't made that request, and later on down the line, somebody files something against my office, and they come in there and they say, well, you didn't do this, I'd like to have the ability to say, because it reduces my liability to say, well, I did ask for that, and I didn't get that. And that's already come up in the past. So within that narrative, is that where you would want us to explain that piece? If I'm, because my problem is there's some things I'm involved in right now that can create a problem for us. If I was just to submit, this is all I need, and then a year from now, they come back and say, well, Sheriff, you didn't even ask for this stuff. So how can you, so I have to put something in there to avoid some liability issues. Is that
And I think
narrative
that's-
there?
And I think it's in the answer in which it says what the impacts of the budget cuts to services will be. So the preliminary requested X dollars, the board is suggesting Y dollars. And to get to Y dollars, I'm going to need to do X, Y, and Z to find what those are.
Because for us, again, I'm going to have a group discussion, we might understand this, but for our office, just as both Mel and Lisa both said, there are certain best practices that if we don't follow them in training, or we don't follow them in the equipment that we give, or we don't follow them in one of those areas, and we fall short, and we become involved in a legal issue. If I haven't written in there that I asked for these things, I didn't get them, I'm in trouble. You never asked for it. So that's why in our preliminary, I'm so concerned about what we asked for, because I'm already involved in something like that right now. And again, we have best practices in almost everything that a deputy sheriff or person in our office does. And if we fall short of that, and somebody says, were you trained adequately in that area? Oh, you didn't have the money for it. Then you can be involved in a legal issue. And I have to be able to tell them, well, I did ask for that funding and didn't receive that, and that's why we fell short. So that's the narrative?
Yeah. I also want to kind of preface this entire conversation in that I made a modification to this in which I included the sheriff's office preliminary budget as submitted that wasn't included in the preliminary budget because of the issue in regards to the counts in a total number, in its totality, as it was presented, so that it can
Reflect the record, can reflect it was there.
reflect the requests of the department. It isn't part of the preliminary budget technically, but I did include it in the budget.
There's no more questions. Why are we being asked to do this in an Excel format and not being allowed to go back in and make the adjustments directly in Munis?
As I understand, Munis is locked down after preliminary, so that modifications to it can be managed and controlled.
By whom?
By the board.
I don't know.
How does it turn out?
Great legal line.
I guess I had the opposite feeling than what Lisa's expressed, which is, as far as I'm concerned, I've submitted a preliminary budget, and that's my preliminary budget, and I think, I don't know that we're disagreeing there, but what I see this as, and that's why I bristled yesterday at the language proposed, which is, I think still how I technically read this, which says that we're being requested to resubmit a revised
To trim the budget again.
preliminary budget. And I don't intend to submit, I don't want that to come across wrong.
You're right, Mike, we're on the same track that I'm talking.
I think that we've done what statutorily we have a duty to do. The way I understand what's being asked is, I mean, because ultimately we have to recognize that the number we're going to get is going to come from the board. And what I understand that is being asked is, tell us what it would mean. And I can do that in a narrative form and in an Excel spreadsheet that shows the preliminary budget that I've submitted, along with, here's the contingencies of if I had to meet this number, this is what it would look like. But I don't really, I guess I have a different feeling, which is I don't have any desire to be putting it into Munis.
And we spent 3 weeks
Exactly.
auditing, we audited all of the preliminary budget. That is.
That's more specifically the
That's
reason
right.
for
Right.
locking it out. The preliminary budget has been audited.
Do not change that, correct.
And to make modifications to that requires what's called a due process. And rather than a department by department modification to what was already written. So I think this somewhat compromises in that the request and actually the request that is being made here is not to put it into Munis, but to garner an understanding of if these were your numbers, what the impact of that would be to the department, and what it would look like in an Excel format, rather than to put it into Munis as a revision to quote a preliminary budget. So that was another reason why I wouldn't want to have it put into Munis on a department by department basis.
Again, facilitate planning what to do should be opposite to one task.
And so what you're asking then is a narrative of this is the impact to our department, that is a number that we have to live with.
And a spreadsheet defining what it might look like very
So
specifically.
you still want line item, this is the effect on each.
So my question is, you've asked for this already, and some did, and some didn't, some complied 100%, some portion, some not. And that's what if that, if that happens again, where are you going, what's going to happen? I mean,
It's up to the board.
I know,
the
but I'm
revenue-
asking the board, it's just because I've complied with so many guidelines of commissioners year after year after year, and I have paid the price dearly for that, because when we really, really had the shortfall, I was already rock bottom. So when I do that, and some others, this is my, it's like, okay, this is where I make all my, reductions. And mine would be all staffing too, that's all I've got left. And some don't, and then a little bit more revenue comes in, it's like, okay, those that submitted 100, well, this will get us through the year, and some won't. So you see, some of us is like, I, kind of like with Mike, it's like, what is the point of this, what is the point? You've already asked, you didn't get the response you wanted. Why ask again, we go through this charade again, instead of saying, this is what it is?
I think I read the other day when I was in the statement that I made, is basically what Karen said, why do this and do it again, and then nothing happens at the very end, the cut comes, and that was my, just in that line, paragraph that I read the other day in there, I'm deeply concerned about the state law telling us to submit what we need, and then they come back and say, well, cut it down from that. I guess if you're saying that preliminary budget's already in there, but I'm still concerned about, okay, do the cut for us. And then we'll decide if it's enough, it's not enough, do the cut again. We keep resubmitting, and I don't compare it in size. I know that in our office, we have many lines, not just, when you ask us to change, it's not just a few employees. It's days of stuff for us to go through, and then all of a sudden something changes and we do it again. And it's counterproductive and a waste of time.
Labor-intensive, it's just, and it just, yeah.
I just want to clarify something. And maybe I misunderstood what you just said. I didn't put the sheriff's budget into Munis.
No, I know.
I simply added the
accept
numbers
just- yes, I
to
got
this
that.
spreadsheet.
I got that.
Okay. Thanks.
One of the things I think we need to recognize, and I think this speaks a little bit to your concerns, Karen, and to some, the agenda topic is 2018 budget process. And the process is, we submit a detailed estimate of non-tax revenues and expenditures necessary to run our offices. That gets presented to the board. ultimately, I think we have to recognize that the board, the next step in the process is the board to make revisions. There will be a hearing, and ultimately the board will fix a budget. I think, I'm speaking to the sheriff's comments as well. We can like it or we can not like what the process is, but that is what the process is. And if a part of that process, which I've always assumed would be the next step in the process, is to have the conversation with the board that says, you've asked us to submit at a certain level, and I couldn't, and this is why. And if you are going to take what it is from what I say I need and from what I get, this is what that would mean for my office. That's always been the next step in the process, and I certainly presumed and still presume that that is the next step in this process. And if a written or narrative explanation of that in advance, I think we've routinely done that as well. But that's different than, that's a different animal than resubmitting the preliminary budget. And it's
But
just,
another step.
there's no, speaking for myself at least, and I think all of us, hopefully, it's not a personal disrespect or a professional disrespect of the different duties that we have. It's just that we have different roles in this process when it comes to developing a county budget. And so I think, Sheriff, your concern about, and Karen, I recognize, and we've seen it happen before.
Yes.
People have said, okay, I'm reduced, and then that's blessed. Now, you said you can run your office on that, so here you go, run your office on it. Well, if it's artificial, then it's artificial. And that's the problem, I think, that, the tension that develops between a letter like this that says, we told you to do X, you didn't do X, now go do it. And that was my impression of the tone of the letter yesterday. I think what I'm understanding today, what's being requested is what I guess I assumed was the next step in the process anyway, which is this schedule to come in and meet with the commissioners and to go over each of our individual budgets to explain where we were able to, do something, where we weren't, why we weren't, and that if we don't have the revenue to support the expenditures that we say that we need, then we have to make changes in the office, and this is what the changes would look like.
But many of the schedules are after when it has to be submitted. So
What submitted?
October 13th, so you want all this information, but many of the departments aren't meeting scheduled until after the 13th. And I think that's my big concern, is like, it's going to be a major decision that I'm going to make on how I'm going to survive this, because I have 4 departments and 3 of them are mandated and one's not. One's a contract, and I'm already pursuing to sever that contract with DOL. I have no other choice. But that is pretty major. I'd really like the conversation with the commissioners prior to putting that on paper, So I hope to have a conversation before we have to submit this.
Well, I think that brings up,
I have a new light on it, because I submitted what we can barely exist on, not what I need. And so that might set a precedent that maybe I don't want out there.
That's the problem I think Mike's
because-
addressing.
Yeah.
And we've
Yeah.
done that for years, and that's how we've kind of ended up where we're at. We come out, I think sometimes that we have been submitting budgets or asked to submit budgets that are based on a false premise. I've said that for many years. We're not what you need, but, and then take it, cut it, and we'll cut it again. And then next year, you're gonna take that budget and go from that one and work forward even lower. I
They're
think
gonna
we've
look
been-
back at the
Yes, because
history
they
of
look
what you
back,
submitted.
and we've
Yeah.
been basing that on a false premise, and I
I agree.
agree with what Mike was saying. And challenges the process and why it does that, but I've seen that for 11 years now.
Well, it's certainly a lot to consider. Appreciate those comments. Any questions or comments on this?
This is Judge Meadows. Can you hear me on Patsy's speakerphone?
Hey,
Certainly
Jeff,
can, Judge.
who's there?
Hey, I've been dutifully listening in. What I would indicated I would stand on my original proposed budget. I would call the other budget a hypothetical budget. If this were all that we had, what would we do? I will prepare it in that light, but not as a proposed budget. And I think from Mike's comments and from some of the comments that have been made, that's the anticipation, but I'm not really positive on that.
I would think so. There's one pusher, but I would think that's, because it's only a hypothetical. You already turned in your budgets. You can't have them back. It doesn't work that way. They're turned in there. Well, one can. But you can't have them back for the most part, and we can't just do them back. They're locked down. That was something that the auditor made clear once it happened. But there is the need for the hypothetical budget because of the reality. We have a reality that we're dealing with either which way you look at it, of how much dollars there is.
But by preparing the hypothetical budget, it's not suggesting that this is what we believe we can live with, but this is the conversation point that we would have with you as to how it will impact the operation of our office if you were to reduce our budget by that much. Am I correct in my understanding?
Right, and I think that's sort of the direction the letter headed in regards to the narrative, and using that as an opportunity to spell some of that out in detail.
Okay, and I'm still on vacation, so I haven't seen the letter, but I'll be back in the office tomorrow.
Goes back to the consequence of the reduction, that's what you're looking for,
Right. That's what,
another reduction.
as I said earlier, we're all gonna have a different way of saying devastating.
Exactly.
But, I mean, that's what they want to hear, I think, is what I'm hearing, is how would it impact the offices?
Just a question for the Board of County Commissioners. Why is it important for you to understand what each department's going to cut? How is that going to affect the bottom number for you as far as cutting? Why is it that you need to have that? Because you've got a number that you've got, and you got to deal with the money that you've got, and you got to put it out. Why is that a necessary part of this process? Are you going to be taking it from one and giving it to another? I mean, why is it that you need to know? I'm just curious, because I want to understand.
First of all, I want to clarify, when you say drug commission, please no one do it.
Right. I
You guys
understand
have
that.
the opportunity to say, the sheriff's office, we represent the sheriff's office. So, my personal desire is, should Copland tax, what could we be buying back? One. Number two, I want to know the impact on the citizens. Knowing this position's cut won't exactly tell me, but I can say, three positions in this department, which could impact response times, it could impact how long it takes to get things done on your house. I don't know, that cannot read how the narrative and then that discussion further. In 1 hour's time, with three positions, it's really hard, or you could expand it, it's really hard to get all the questions answered and asked, and so for me, it's helpful to have it ahead of time so that I can ask questions based on what I got information ahead of time. Sometimes when you get the information first time, you really right there and then, I'm reading at the same time as I'm trying to understand and all those sorts of things.
So you're saying, like, if a citizen was to come up and ask you as a commissioner, if this happens, what would be the effect on Karen's office? You would be able to say, when I spoke with Karen, these are the following things that would not be possible anymore if this doesn't pass. That's what you're asking for, right? So you have an explanation to the citizen.
Also in the past, when we're negotiating out budgets and stuff, there's been times where commissioners have to make a decision on this is more important than this, or this isn't. Or there's been times in the past where the other departments have worked together in order to be able to change things around within themselves because we're having those discussions and they're able to keep an employee or what. And that may be very much a point that this one, you may be $5,000 off in this department and that department from losing a person. You may be $5,000 off on 2 or 3 of them. Or they may be able to work together, or we all may be able to work together in order to save 2 of those jobs. But you can't do it if you don't have any of the numbers at all. If we're just gonna set an arbitrary number, which is always, I guess, possible. Just set the number and just say that's what it is, but I didn't know over the years, that's what everybody says they didn't want to see. So, if everybody wants that now, okay, but that's over the years, it's not been what they wanted.
Yeah, and I would just probably add on to that to say that it was probably, I mean, for me at least, it comes back to what would the budget workshops then look like? What conversation are we having in the budget workshops? And, you know, to what extent are they a rote presentation on, you know, a number that's provided by the commission, or what, you know, what productive level do we want to have those conversations at in terms of, you know, what Commissioner Meadows said in terms of trying to reconcile different parts of the budget to try and make as much work as possible. So I think it would just, in a lot of ways, color the conversation of our budget workshops.
I might get back to what Commissioner Drexler said, I don't know what the question was asked. Just as clarification, so, and I think you're right on that, to be able to, because I know that in our office, people ask me just like they do you, I'm sure, on the street, if this doesn't pass, basically that's what are we going to lose? I think I probably heard from most of you today that it's staffing. But I think beyond that, what you're asking for is, if we lose that staffing, what are our services going to look like? And so what I'm envisioning, if I've got this right, is maybe even more of a letter form to say, these are our areas and this is the impacts that we foresee will be likely if these budget needs aren't met. So you would be able to say we would have less of this and less of that, we wouldn't be doing certain things. And I absolutely agree with that. The only challenge is for us is there's so many little things that I don't know if I can list every little tiny thing that could happen and then have somebody come back and say, well, you never told us that, because there are like thousands of things probably for each of us that we wouldn't have. But I think generally the question there, the comment that Commissioner Drexler made is that, so if somebody asked you, Commissioner, if this budget doesn't pass, maybe part of the response times from the sheriff's office going to be, how much longer would that, how much longer do you have to wait? So you'd be able to say, well, this is what we've been told. And I don't have any problem doing that, but I don't know that every circumstance is a tiny bit different. It's been only 15 minutes, and now it's been 22 minutes. But I think you're just asking in general, correct? So you can give a response to it.
So I imagine once the budget's passed, then you have another try to enter in your information, and you see what the reality of that is. And it's not static.
So as we come in, I think Mike, the prosecutor was asking, this would be more of a narrative form on this. So you could have something that say these are the things that would probably be impacted, right?
I suppose to some extent, but I'd also, again, for me personally, I'd like to use it for what would we buy back should that go pass? And so that is a dollar increase there too, so.
I got you.
Any other questions or comments on that?
I just have one comment. I just want to make sure that I need to address something that's in this letter. And the Superior Court's position on this is that the statute did require us to provide a budget that was the estimated needs for the following year. And I'll echo what I've heard the departments talk about. Our approach has been to provide that with an expectation that the board would come back and say, we need to see this cut. And then at the end of that discussion, there would be a directive from the board to provide that cut. It's concerning to me to read the paragraph that says that a preliminary budget did not follow the budget guidelines. When in my analysis, it has so far, the process has not been completed. So the guidelines, we're fully expecting that guidelines are going to be implemented, but the process isn't done. So the preliminary budget is compliant with the guidelines presented. The guidelines haven't been affected yet because they haven't had a chance to have that discussion. So it's concerning to read that the budget did not follow when the budget's not the process has not been completed. So I just want to make sure, I just wanted to clear the air on that because I do not feel good about doing the people's work, providing what the statute requires me to provide, and then hear that we did something wrong. Because I do not believe that anything wrong occurred.
Great, thank you. For what it's worth, that's where I take from this conversation something better than my first impression. I mean, it's all caps, it's in bold, it feels angry. And yet, I think we all have a duty to do what the statute says we have a duty to do, and it's just what the process is. Thank you.